Hello everyone, my name is Alexis Daniel and this is my second case presentation for the semester. For context, I am completing my practicum this year at the Bikita Empowerment Initiative, which is one of the programs housed under Catholic Charities. We work directly with survivors of human trafficking, specifically both labor and sex trafficking. The case that I wanted to speak with you all about today, or the event rather, occurred a couple of weeks ago. It was a law enforcement action centered or strategically planned around the farm machinery show. A lot of people don't know this, but the farm machinery show is right up there with the Kentucky Derby and other more well-known events for sex trafficking, due to the large influx of single men in the area who are coming in for the show. For this operation specifically, the victim service providers were stationed in Shepherdsville, so that we were a little bit out of the commotion. The law enforcement action was scheduled for 3 p.m. to 12 a.m. and the general premise of the operation was that undercover police officers were posing as buyers for prostitutes and asking, once they came into contact with these women, they were asking them to come down to the police department and answer questions about potential trafficking and traffickers and other people of interest in the city. So yeah, with the Bikita Empowerment Initiative, we were present at the Shepherdsville Police Department to provide victim services, as I previously mentioned, for individuals who did screen positive for human trafficking. We were able to offer the potential for case management services if that was something they were interested in. But a lot of the girls we ended up working with were mostly looking for immediate services, so that meant we had food cards, hotel cards, Uber gift cards, all kinds of gift cards, as well as information and connections to drug rehab centers. A lot of the women in the sex industry do have some substance abuse issues, and that proved to be true for a lot of the women we were working with, and they were really interested to ask us for our insight as case managers. But okay, that was a little bit of background. For this case presentation specifically, I wanted to share my experience working with one of the women who was brought in by police during the law enforcement action. This woman was in her mid-50s and shared that she had been working as a prostitute for several decades, actively using methamphetamines. The woman and her daughter had been experiencing houselessness for several months. Although she did not screen positive for human trafficking, she was able to provide police officers with some information about violent crime she had encountered over the last several weeks. This client identified that she was interested in entering into a drug rehabilitation program. She also was very adamant in speaking to her daughter before she went to any of these programs. We learned that her daughter was staying at the hotel where she had been picked up, and that she was also actively using. The woman shared with us that the two of them had been talking about getting into a program together anyway, even just the day before. So she was really excited to go, but didn't want to go that night, wanted to go home, talk it over with her daughter. And then she reassured us that she would call us back the next day regardless of whether or not her daughter decided to come. Okay, so with that in mind, me and the other Bikita workers started calling around to local programs in the area who deal with substance misuse. Many did not have open beds at all. I would say we probably called anywhere between 5 or 10 different programs, even in surrounding counties and all the things, just because there wasn't a lot of availability. Luckily, this individual had Medicaid, so that was definitely a positive in our eyes, because they are one of the more likely to be accepted insurances that we've seen in our experience. After calling multiple people, we thought we were in luck because we'd found a program that had 2 open beds, and we were just making final arrangements when, at the very end of the conversation, the lady on the phone asked me what the client's drug of choice was, and I shared with her that it was methamphetamines, and she said that they did not offer inpatient services for individuals who use methamphetamines, that they only offered outpatient services for this drug only and specifically. So that was shocking for us to hear after a very long intake process, as well as a little confusing. I didn't realize at the time that certain programs would not accept all drug types. In addition, this program let us know that they did not accept family members entering into programs together. It was their opinion that family members and close friends who enter in the program can have negative effects on each other's long-term success. But ultimately that proved to be or I should say that would have proved to have been a deal breaker for a participant, but given that they didn't service people who were using meth, we realized we would have to keep looking. Causes and consequences of this problem. Obviously, there is just a general lack of access to addiction services, both drug and alcohol, in the community. Unfortunately, this is a social issue that only continues to grow. But sadly, I don't think that we see the funding and support for these programs growing at the same rate as the need is. In this situation in particular, local programs not accepting methamphetamine users, as well as not accepting family members at the same time, was a large obstacle for us. Obviously, all service providers often have valid reasoning for their policies. It can just be a little frustrating when you're looking through the lens of your specific client and their specific circumstances. But nevertheless, looking through the values of social workers, the importance of human relationships is obviously very essential to this case. This woman had endured a very traumatic, I think by the time she ended up getting out of there, most of the women who were coming down to the police department were being questioned, anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. And it was just a very long, traumatic, tense experience. Although, as Bikita workers were there trying to make it as least stressful as possible, just the nature of a law enforcement action does put some pressure on the individuals. But with all that being said, this woman was most concerned about getting home to her daughter, to explaining to her daughter where she had been all night, as well as trying to convince her daughter to enter into this program together so that they could both pursue their sobriety. Even given a plethora of all the resources we could provide that night, nothing was more important to this client, then maintaining that relationship with her daughter, which is very understandable. And we all really wanted for her daughter to be able to support her on that journey as well. Just hopefully in a different program that would be more well suited to them. Unfortunately, the night ended. The participant, we had suggested, letting her go home and get some rest and consider everything we had talked about. It had been a very overwhelming night with a lot of faces and a lot of questions and a lot of information. And she agreed that that would be a good choice and that she would be in contact with us. As of right now, she hasn't reached back out. But she has all of the numbers and phone numbers and community resources that we discussed that night. So hopefully she'll be able to take advantage of some of those if she feels so inclined. Looking at gainers and losers, I can't think of a gainer in this situation, really. I mean, addiction counselors aren't winning in this situation. They are filled overpacked, overcrowded, and in ever-increasing demand, which leads to higher rates of burnout and staff turnover and just overall ineffectiveness of those programs in and of themselves. Looking more specifically at the woman that I was working with that night, her and her daughter both lose out pretty substantially in this situation. As I had mentioned earlier, they are both likely still living out of their car, still actively in very active addiction, with all of the physical and mental setbacks that can come along with that. And so yeah, it's a disheartening situation all around, but one that there is definitely a lot of room for improvement for. So with that in mind, looking forward to an action plan. I think it's very clear from this situation and others I've had that education and awareness is going to have to be one of the top priorities moving forward. If there's any progress to be made in increasing services for individuals who are struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. Like I said earlier, although the need for these types of services continues to increase, the financial, social, cultural support does not, which only further exacerbates the issue. Additionally, there needs to be a social shift from looking at addiction as a medical condition, medicalization as opposed to criminalization. We saw that a lot too with this law enforcement action, as a lot of the women were very hesitant to share their drug use and drug history, just even being in the police department building itself, which just shows a general lack of distrust, not only with law enforcement, but also just how deeply rooted the negative connotations surrounding drug use are in the United States. A couple questions for the class. And the first one is a really genuine question because I've been doing a lot of research since this happened and I can't find the answer. But does anyone know why a drug rehab program would only see individuals who use meth on an outpatient basis? So as a reminder, the program stated that they did not service individuals using meth inpatient, only outpatient. And after doing my own individual research and asking around, I can't find any reason why this may be, but I'm sure there is. So if anyone knows and would like to share, that would be great. And also, do you think that family members should be able to enter into programs together? Why or why not? Obviously, there are arguments to be made for both sides, but I'm just curious with your guys' experiences at Practicum and maybe experiences working with individuals with substance use issues, whether or not you think personally that it is a pro or a con in the discussion. Thank you.